So rolling into presentation, and for those who are not really familiar with BONARD, we are basically a research company. We are based in Vienna, and we are an independent advisory firm focusing on student housing and co-living. We also expanded to other asset classes like senior living, but basically student housing and co-living is our home ground. We have 4 offices, a team of 50 people, and we delivered almost 500 projects to our clients. Basically, we are also member of United Nations, UNWTO, and also member of SMR, which is basically the global research organization, and also member of GRI Club. We work with governments, we work with universities, banks, but also with investment groups, with developers, operators, and we support them with accurate and consistent data. And we try, when we are providing also the assessments of their opportunities, macro assessment, etc. We cover continents around the globe, about 130 markets and sub-markets, about 7,000 operational assets, up to 1,000 assets that are in the pipeline and are coming to the market. And we also monitor the transactions, the new applications, the new plots, and the new opportunities that are coming to the sector. Getting to the presentation, and before we're going to look into how 2021 is shaping with focus on the new academic year, let me just quickly summarize how 2020 looked like from our perspective. We basically provided the research on top 25 PBSA providers and operators across UK and continental Europe. They represent more than 300,000 beds, and you can see some results on the following slide. It is really important to note that the market reaction has provided some solid foundation going into 2021. And as you can see, more than half of the providers did not really apply any specific measurements. Only some of them provided some rent reductions, free cancellations, or some booking guarantees. It is really also important to note that enrollment figures for 2020/2021 remain stable, which was also reflected in the private PBSA occupancy rates. We note that for the UK, and especially for new properties that opened recently, the average occupancy rates were between 80 to 90%, while the most of the continental Europe was even more than 90%. Interestingly enough, as we also track the pipeline, we saw that 79% of establishments that were under constructions were also delivered on time and within the original time frame. And finally, we did not see so much divestment activities. Actually, the transacted volume in 2020 in continental Europe was stable compared to the volume we saw in 2019. Here you can see geographically how the continental Europe performed in the case of occupancy rates. Certain cities like Madrid or Barcelona or Dublin were less than 80%, but the rest of the market, especially in CE and continental Europe, were either between 80 to 90% or even 90 plus. You will be also able to hear more from the panelists who will be sharing their experience and their perspectives on occupancy rates later on the panel. And now rolling into the patterns and factors that should shape the student mobility in 2021. And we at BONARD, as independent market research company, which is also tracking the student mobility and demand for student housing, we developed a student mobility recovery tracker. Here on the slide, you can see some indicators it's based on. Of course, the key component includes the vaccination rollout, which is basically the key factor determining the face-to-face tuition restart. We also note that for students, it is really important that the health and safety measurements is in place. Also, what are the destinations they are going to travel to, and what is the number of COVID-19 cases per individual city. We also track the student application volume, which is kind of a prediction of how the next academic year will look like in the case of demand. For international students in particular, it is the key component to track the access to their visa. And finally, the overall image for the destination they want to travel to, how they handled the pandemic period, what are the entry conditions, and also some initiatives towards attraction of new international students. Going back to applications, which is something that helps us to assess demand levels for the next academic years. Together with our research department, we conducted and prepared 3 case studies showing the year-over-year changes in applications. On the following slide, you can see the first case study from the United States, which shows the first year application volume and the changes between 2021 and 2020. We can see 11% increase between those years. And following with the UK and comparing to European sector, we can see also how it's showed in the UK. We saw minor growth between 2020 and 2019, which can be already a positive sign, of course, for the first COVID year. And going into 2021, we can see the further increase of 8.5%. Here, it is really worth to note that the biggest driver behind this development was an uptake among the students from England, so the domestic mobility. However, looking at international students' application, we note opposing trends for EU students and non-EU students. While EU students' application dropped by 40%, application for non-EU students grew by 17%. And to conclude the case studies, we also looked at Ireland, which faced a slight drop between 2020 and 2019. But further, we note a strong rebound, which was quite similar to the UK market. And we noted the increase of 8.5% in the volume of the applications. This provides us a strong message that the number of student application is increasing and was increasing also during the COVID and even more after the COVID period. Another key development is obviously the vaccination rate. And we prepared the outlook looking at the forecast about the vaccine dose, which should be provided by the end of September 2021. We considered the current pace of vaccination in the given countries, and it can be noted that most of the continental Europe countries will have their adults population vaccinated by the end of September. Of course, here we are talking about adults that want to get vaccinated, and it is purely mathematical method and model, which is using available vaccination trends and data from the past 20 weeks. However, at the end of the day, this should provide the good outlook for resuming of the face-to-face tuition in continental Europe in the next 2021-2022 academic year. And speaking about a face-to-face delivery and the plans for the next academic year, and to maybe wrap it up, we see that the universities and the students are really eager to resume face-to-face tuition in the next academic year. Maybe just to provide a few updates on this front, and just for the selected countries. In England, the students are already allowed to return to the campuses for in-person lessons as of this Monday. To compare to Germany, which is mostly digital now, but still universities are making efforts to facilitate the returns to face-to-face tuition as soon as possible. They are also proactive and have proactive programs to help the students get vaccinated as soon as possible and to speed up the process and to resume to face-to-face delivery as soon as possible. From some other part of the world, we've seen in the US an increasing number of institutions that would rather, and that declared actually they will request students to be vaccinated in order to resume face-to-face classes in the next academic year and in fall 2021. And lastly, the study on international students done by QS found that 71% of international students would rather quarantine in a host country and to be able to study in person rather than remain at home and study online. This provides us a strong message, and it also mirrors our research and expertise from all international education sectors, where students perceive online tuition as not preferred option. And as soon as it will be possible to resume the travel and to resume the face-to-face delivery, they will come back to the campuses. So altogether, it provides us a strong message for the next academic year. On the one hand, we can see the increasing volume of application in selected countries. On the other hand, we see the great willingness of both universities and students to come back to on-campus learning and to have face-to-face tuition. And on top of that, it's all supported by the vaccination program, which according to our forecasts and the speed of the vaccination trend in Europe should be done for the most of the adults by the end of September. All this, to conclude, should enable to resume to a post-pandemic period to face-to-face delivery and to get back to the countries that are studying, even in the case of the quarantine and other things that might be in the way.